Welcome to Pure Nonfiction, the podcast interviewing documentary filmmakers. I'm your host, Tom Powers, the documentary programmer for the Toronto International Film Festival and for the Miami Film Festival happening this month. On this episode, I talked to filmmaker Marina Zenovich. Her new film is Water and Power, a California heist that explores how big agriculture made millions by gaining private control of water. This story hits close to home for Marina because she grew up in California. Her late father, George Zenovich, was a state politician. Our interview took place in January, the day after the film's world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival. Watching Water and Power, you can't help but think of Roman Polanski's Chinatown.
Going to be a lot of irate citizens when they find out that they're paying for water that they're not going to get.
Oh, that's all taken care of. See, Mr. Gitz, either you bring the water to L.A., or you bring L.A. to the water.
How are you going to do that?
By incorporating the valley into the city. Simple as that.
How much are you worth?
I've no idea. How much do you want?
No, I just want to know what you're worth. Over 10 million?
Oh, my, yes.
Why are you doing it? How much better can you eat? What can you buy that you can't already afford?
The future, Mr. Gitz. The future.
Of course, Marina would be drawn to a topic made famous by Polanski. She spent over a decade profiling that director in 2 documentaries. In the first half of our interview, we discussed those films before we turned to California's water. The 2 topics are intertwined. Here's the opening of her film, Roman Polanski, Wanted and Desired, where the director is being interviewed by a British journalist.
Granted that it's too easy and a cliche to connect your work with your life in such a direct manner. Let me take the example of Chinatown. Chinatown is really a movie about justice not winning. Is that what you would come to believe by that stage?
No, not at all. But if you want your film to serve any purpose, if you want to show injustice or corruption of Los Angeles in that period, you have to show that injustice somehow won and leave them with a feeling of frustration.
Roman Polanski, Wanted and Desired, delves deep into the director's 1977 arrest for the sexual assault of a 13-year-old. The case dragged on for months in the court of the controversial Judge Rittenband. The film interviews players on all sides, including prosecutors, defense lawyers, and the victim, Samantha Geimer. The film gives a fresh understanding for why Polanski grew fearful of Judge Rittenband and chose to flee from the United States in 1978 before the case was settled. Marina's film stirred up fresh attention that culminated in 2009 when the Swiss police arrested Polanski again for the unfinished case with the threat of extradition to the United States. He was held in jail, then under house arrest for several months before the Swiss finally let him go. Marina covered that saga in a follow-up film called Roman Polanski, Odd Man Out that I showed at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2012. I asked how she came to focus on Polanski in the first place.
I had made a film about Bernard Tapie, this Frenchman, who was such an amazing character. I never thought I'd find anyone more interesting than him.
Bernard Tapie is a French businessman and media personality. In Marina's 2001 film, Who is Bernard Tapie?, she gives this description.
My only French friend, Anne-Laure, said everyone in France knew who he was. He had the charm and good looks of Warren Beatty, the bravado of Donald Trump, the charisma of Bill Clinton, and he fell from grace like O.J. Simpson.
After that film, it took me like a year and a half. I was looking at various subjects. It's very hard to find good subject matters you can sink your teeth into. So I happened to be in Los Angeles when there was an article in the LA Times Sunday calendar talking about whether Roman Polanski could come, if he got nominated for The Pianist, would he be able to come back? I started sniffing around, met with various people, and then made one phone call to an old friend, Rich Radden, who used to run the LA Film Festival. And it was an odd coincidence that Rich knew the DA from the case, who was the bishop at his church because I'm sure you remember the DA is Mormon and Rich is Mormon. And then he knew Roman Polanski's godson as well. So in that one phone call, I had not access, but I had a door open into two separate worlds. And that was really a sign to me that, oh, maybe I should follow this.
And how much contact did you have with Polanski?
I had reached out to him. I had faxed him. I got his fax number from someone, which was such a coup back then. Oh my God, maybe I could get to him. He never responded. But once I was in touch with his office several years later, his secretary told me that he received the fax and that he tried to fax me back. And they had a letter where he said, I do not want you to make a film about me, but I never received the fax because it was, I had one of those phones that, I don't even know if I had a fax on my phone. It was just like he was probably sending it to my, landline.
Right. Do you think that would have made any difference if you'd received that letter?
I wondered when I heard that. I don't like to cause problems, but somehow I always do. I swear to God, it's not intentional. I just kind of have a nose for stumbling into things that there's something there and I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. And I don't know. I mean, I feel like if I got that letter, I don't know what I would have done.
So that film, Roman Polanski, Wanted and Desired, certainly transformed the way I understood that case, and I think transformed the way many people understood that case. What were the toughest interviews for you to get in that film that you did get?
His lawyer was very, very difficult. It was really the first time I used a family connection to try to get to someone. And I used a friend of my dad's who was a lawyer in Los Angeles, and he called me back and said, boy, he really does not want to talk to you. And I thought I could, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I kept trying. And he finally one day called me. And I think he saw that I wasn't kind of letting go.
Here's Polanski's lawyer, Douglas Dalton, in the film.
People have the right to their own opinions about what happened, but they don't have the right to their own facts. The fact of Polanski leaving the country and so forth seems to have eclipsed the really important part of this case about what actually happened to the system of justice. I remain astounded after all these years. This case will never leave me.
But he was a very difficult interview to get. The DA, even though I had the connection, we met at Noma, this great Japanese restaurant in Santa Monica. We must have met like 5 times over a course of a year and a half. And I can still remember, every time I drive by there, I think of that first meeting with him because I didn't know the details of the case. I'm not a lawyer, although I should have gone to law school after doing all these legal films. But I can remember.
Yeah, kind of was a law school doing that.
Exactly. But I could, not good enough for the parents, right? Don't have the degree, but, But I remember sitting with him and furiously scribbling these notes, trying to, just wrap my head around. He had never spoken to anyone. And I mean, it was just meant to be. The only reason he sat down with me is because we had the mutual friend in Rich Radden, and documentaries, it's all about trust. It's all about someone feeling that they can trust you and telling their story.
In the film, a local reporter describes the reputation of DA Roger Gunson.
The rumor in the district attorney's office was that they picked Gunson to handle the case because he was a Mormon and because he was the only member of the DA's office who hadn't had sex with an underage girl.
And here's the straight-laced Gunson.
I heard some jokes about why they gave it to me, but I can't imagine those are accurate. There were a lot of prosecutors who had an interest in high-publicity cases. Although I had had one very high-publicity case, I was not one that looked for them.
Well, the other big person who trusted you in that case was the woman at the center of the story.
Geimer. Yeah, I met with her lawyer. I made 2 films. So to me, the first film, I got Samantha in the film. It was very much what her lawyer wanted, which was the 2 of them more of a two-shot in a legal room with law books. So it wasn't ideal. I mean, I always had imagined the film as her being in exile in Hawaii and him being in exile in France. So it was kind of like I wanted to journey to those two places. And I was able to do that with her in the second film, Roman Polanski, Odd Man Out, and interview her mother. So Samantha, I think as well, wanted to tell her story. I think the film empowered her. She went on to write a book about it. Getting her to talk was a big deal, and then getting her mother to talk in the second film was, huge.
In the second film, Roman Polanski, Odd Man Out, Samantha Geimer discusses her feelings about Polanski.
I don't want to hold on to being angry with him for the rest of my life. I didn't want to do it when I was 13 or when I was 15, and I don't want to do it now. That's self-destructive. So I forgave him to be a healthier person for myself, not for him. I mean, I'm sure he appreciates that I've forgiven him, but I didn't do it to make him feel better. I did it because that's how you heal and go through life. And frankly, I have been victimized far worse by a lot more people. So he's kind of at the bottom of my list of, people I feel harmed by at this moment.
After the first film, you thought you were done with Polanski. You'd spent several years on it, but because of the first film's existence and what it stirred up, it kind of reopened that case. Can you describe how it reopened that case?
Sure. So we premiered, we had an amazing year. We premiered at Sundance in 2008, and then we played Cannes. We were on HBO. It was all just, kind of gliding along. I decided to make a short film because there started to be some noise about, is this film going to reopen the case? So I decided to start filming if there were any court hearings and just see where it took me. But it was definitely going to be a short film. I talked to Polanski at that point. He was going to be interviewed, and it was just going to be a short. Then September, the Emmys came around. We won 2 Emmys. I have to tell you how it goes because it's also positive, right? And like an amazing moment in my career. And 2 weeks after we won the Emmys, I got a call
it's like the record needle, the scratches suddenly.
Exactly. I got a call from Polanski's lawyer, who I'd become his lawyer's son, and I'd become very fond of Doug Dalton, the lawyer. And so when I saw that his son was calling me on a Saturday, I thought, oh my God, something's happened to him, to the lawyer.
Right, yeah.
And I said, what's wrong? And he said, I just want you to know that Roman was just arrested in Switzerland. And I was like, what? And in that moment, oh my God, what a crazy kind of chapter of my life began in that moment. It was getting ready for the onslaught of press. It was suddenly like, okay, Roman is in jail. This was in September. We were interviewing him in November because he was editing. We were initially going to interview him in September, but then he was editing Ghostwriter. So we pushed it to November. It was just kind of like insanity. And suddenly it became something bigger, of which I was a part.
Roman Polanski, Odd Man Out, documents the case coming back into court 30 years later. Here's Polanski's defense lawyer, Chad Hummel.
We now know, Your Honor, based on a film that was released in 2008, that Roman Polanski's sentence in this case to a crime to which he pleaded guilty, a sentence which he fully served, resulted from illegal ex parte communications between a prosecutor and the trial judge.
Marina had gone from being an observer in the case to a participant.
The LA Superior Court basically was trying to shut this film down. And I never really understood why so many people at the LA Superior Court and the DA's office were so invested in never doing anything with this case. because there were things that were handled improperly. So being kind of relatively naive, I never really understood why they wouldn't just say these were mistakes made in the past, despite what he did. These were mistakes, and clearly the judge was doing, the judge and the David Wells, the assistant district attorney, were doing some, funny business, as had Roman Polanski, and why he was in this mess. But my late father, who was a politician and a judge, really kind of made me understand that institutions never really want to claim that they did anything wrong. And that was a big lesson. It's like, why couldn't someone just stand up and say, there were mistakes made. He went through this. He went through the system. He served his time that was given to him. They pulled him out. It was a 90-day diagnostic. They pulled him out after 43 days. He thought it was over because he pled, and he thought it was over, but then the judge changed the goalposts. It was a fascinating period of my life. And I actually had a dream about him where he was holding a sign that said, "You are a guest in my life." Isn't that fantastic?
Wow.
It was such a strange relationship because I stumbled on this story. I made this film. There ended up being information that wasn't out there. Like it was if you went down to the LA Times and, went in the microfiche library. So I was this person who happened to make this film that his team thought would reopen the case and end the case, basically. That was never my intention. That was just what came organically out of the film. But instead, because it got so much international attention, someone who worked at, Interpol was reading the newspaper and saw that the Zurich Film Festival was giving Roman Polanski a Lifetime Achievement Award and thought, Roman Polanski, isn't that someone who's on the red list? So it was a fascinating process to go through. And our relationship is, he's always been very cordial to me, but it goes without saying that he himself has said to me, "You started this with after what he did." But so I guess that's the role of the documentary filmmaker, right?
Was your father alive during that time to give you guidance?
Was, yeah. No, it was great that my whole family was here at Sundance, and it was great. My dad was the one who kind of knew that this was going to stir a lot of things up. And I didn't even really know. I kind of stumbled into this story. I was very hungry to find something that I could really sink my teeth into. It's after you have a success and then you have a dry period where things aren't working. And it's usually after the dry period where you're so hungry that you end up really nailing it, because it takes so many different things to not only, get the money, get the access, get the people you want to work with you to make the good film. It's so hard that, it's just a series of, because you talk to people all the time. But I just kind of stumbled into the Polanski story, and it ended up being like a defining moment in my career. I spent 10 years on it. I'm kind of intertwined with him, and then Alex Gibney pitches me Chinatown, the documentary, and instead of running, I say, what? That sounds very interesting.
We'll be back with more from Marina Zenovich, discussing her new film, Water and Power, A California Heist, after the break. If you love documentary film, you should know about the True False Film Fest, taking place in Columbia, Missouri, the first weekend of March. The festival has earned a deep respect for its exploration of the gray area between fiction and nonfiction. Now, there's a True False podcast you can hear on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes will be released every Thursday. For more information, visit truefalse.org. In Water and Power, A California Heist, Marina investigates the secret history of deal-making between big agriculture and politicians. The film was made with Alex Gibney's company Jigsaw Productions for National Geographic. Marina interviews a wide array of people affected by California's water crisis. A prominent figure is the journalist Mark Arax.
For the last 4 years, everybody has been very desperate in California for water. And the image that has been projected to the world is that California has become dry, that the land is turned to sand, that we're parched. But this is not true, because for the past 4 years, in the midst of this drought, agriculture has recorded record crops each and every year.
To the record profits for California farmers.
You mentioned your father before, and I hadn't really understood before I was reading the press notes for Water and Power that your dad was a politician, Democratic politician in California. Can you tell me more about his career?
My dad was, high school president, class president at his college, went on to be an assemblyman and a senator and a judge, and was really a big Democrat in California, involved in a lot of things that shaped the state, not super involved in water, but his district was the Central Valley. So my dad passed away a few years ago, and part of the reason why I was interested in this project was, in a way, it was like going home. Spending a lot of time kind of in the Central Valley felt like it was a way to get closer to my dad and kind of what he had, experienced through politics and the world.
What was your relationship with him growing up?
Oh, all you have to do is see who is Bernard Tapie. And my dad was like a gorgeous, sophisticated gentleman who I admired greatly and used to try to act like him. I used to go to the Capitol and work there every other summer, and I really took in kind of what was happening. And I could have gone into politics, but I was always more interested in entertainment.
Did he have any opinions about what he wanted you to do?
I think both my parents thought I should have been a lawyer, but my dad started out, he put himself through law school playing the stand-up bass.
Wow.
So my dad was a musician, and my mother was an actress in the former Yugoslavia who also went to law school. So we have that kind of music and acting in our blood.
So it's not a total rebellion to go into entertainment.
No, but I mean, they got their law degrees, right? But it was great for my parents to be here. To you want your parents to see you succeed, get married, have a child. My dad married me because he was a judge, so it's all good.
That's great.
And this is the personal hour with Marina Zenovich. Anyway, I'm sorry he wasn't here. This would be a very, very interesting moment for him.
So when Alex Gibney approaches you, says, I've got this project about water in California, you were immediately interested.
Oh, totally. I mean, Alex is my go-to guy for questions, problems. He's amazing in how helpful he can be. And I think...
Well, give me an example of that. How has he served that way in the past?
Just anytime I have anything really complicated or, dealing with a difficult person in a film what rights they want, or, how do I go about doing... It's just... It's frontline stuff that only, what people want to do here? They want to share like horror stories. And it's just because doing this stuff is really hard, and you need a support system, and you need people who have been through it to help you get through it. And it's funny, I'm always looking to learn. So I'm never afraid to ask for advice or you just want to learn.
Well, I also think it's true, like after you've gone through something especially difficult, whether it's a creative challenge or a personality challenge or a business challenge, like you want to share it so that someone else doesn't have to experience it.
Exactly. I mean, I can remember Alex and his wife coming up to my hotel room in Toronto when
Odd Man
Out was there, but I was doing my contract for the Richard Pryor film, and Alex like giving me advice. It's that kind of stuff that he's amazing at. So he is my go-to person. We'd never worked together, and I was thrilled when he wanted me to do. And he knows my struggles. He knows that I've been trying to make a film about Jerry Brown. He knows what I'm interested in. He knew who my dad was. So, and he came up with the title Wanted and Desired. So he was there at an early screening of that, when he was trying to get in the elevator to leave. And I'm like, please tell me this is going to work out. I mean, it's these films are hard. But it's a joy to be able to do this for a living.
So when you started out on Water and Power, what were the resources you had and what were the things that you had to figure out to tell this story?
Well, I had a lot of resources because, Jigsaw is a company that has, they're fully staffed and, I'm like a one-man band with regards to research and stuff. And I love that stuff. I should have been a private investigator of just finding things and people, and I pride myself on that. But Lynn Kirby was working with Alex and came up with the idea. And so they had done a lot of research already. So when they came to me, they already had investigated various things. They had identified Mark Arax as someone who would be someone to follow, and it turns out that I'm from Fresno. Mark and I went to the same high school. I know his little brother. I knew his work. It was the perfect fit. So I had all this research already, which is great, but it had to go through me because it's very dense.
Right.
And it's a lot of information. And I have to tell you, when my sister saw the film, she was like, oh my God, you have to make a part 2. And I was like, are you kidding me? But watching it last night, thank you, Ninon, I have to say, the thought crossed my mind. Because it's so dense. And it's like once you've done
the spade work, you want to capitalize on that.
Yeah. Because once you kind of start to understand, and I watch Water and Power California Heist, and I still just can't believe it. It's such a sobering experience, even having made the movie. And I feel like I'm constantly trying to reinforce my knowledge of the facts. Not what's the line this week? The alternative facts, not the alternative facts, but the facts. Because there is so much.
In the film, journalist Mark Arax explains the involvement of Stuart Resnick, owner of Franklin Mint Collectibles. Resnick used his Franklin Mint profits to buy land in California.
And he started purchasing these large swaths of land in West Kern in the late 1970s. And remember, Western Kern has no groundwater, so it should have never been developed as farmland. But Resnick's a gambler, and he had a vision to move California's water from where it was to where it wasn't. Resnick wasn't in the room at the Monterey agreements, but Resnick's main waterman, Bill Fillmore, had a major role. And the water bank was identified, and smartly so, by the Resnick people as something that they wanted. This was one of the prizes of that negotiation.
You grew up around politicians, so it can't be that surprising to you, the world of deal making. But I wonder, as you got into the research for Water and Power, were there things that did surprise you?
A lot of things surprised me. I mean, what was interesting about the deal making and the Monterey amendments was basically it really depended on who you talked to, what kind of story you got. A lot of this stuff is done behind closed doors. And I can't remember who in the film, it's not in the film, but he told me that, we never could have had these meetings in front of the public. And I understand that, but because it's like, could they have gotten it done? But at the same time, they shouldn't have gotten it done. I mean, I guess I'm forever kind of fascinated by power and negotiation and deal making and ego and greed and who is doing what for whom. I think in my dad's day, I may be wrong, but it seemed a little more innocent. It wasn't so much about the money. My dad was a Democrat, but and this is in California, in the legislature, they would negotiate and, it's all deal making. It's, look, Tom, I'm going to give you that vote on your Toronto bill, but I need you to I'll give you that if you give me this on my dock bill. It's like, it's the way it's done. It's
the art of compromises.
Exactly. The art of compromise. And, it just seems like it's all gotten uglier.
More compromised.
Exactly. You say it better than me. And a lot of it has to do with greed. And I love the moment in the film when Tony Rossman says, someone once advised me, never underestimate the power of greed. And if you're not a greedy person, you don't really think like that. How much is enough?
Well, that goes back to Chinatown.
Exactly. My God. How much? So I'm so much is happening in the world related to this.
Key figures in this film, although they weren't interviewed in the film, are Stuart and Linda Resnick, who own a lot of land in California and are growers. Can you, for people who haven't seen the film, describe who Stuart and Linda Resnick are and how they figure in the story?
So the Resnicks are huge farmers. I think they're the biggest farmers in the state of California and maybe the United States. They own a lot of land in the Central Valley, and they have a lot of power. And our film talks about something called the Monterey Amendments, which a lot of people don't know about, which is a series of meetings that took place in the 90s where a water bank in Kern County, which was owned by the state, was basically given to a consortium of companies, which a vast percentage of it, a huge percentage, was owned by the Resnicks. So, and then they went on to make a lot of money and sell a lot of wonderful almonds and pistachios. But it's not just the Resnicks. This is a story about big ag versus the little guy and kind of...
the Resnicks come off as notable characters in your film. Would you say they're kind of representing many different versions of big agriculture, or do they stand out in this story?
Well, you can't tell the story without them. They're intertwined with the Monterey Amendments. And I think Stuart Resnick has been quoted as saying, we bought the water bank, so it's ours. We own it. But there's been a lawsuit going on for many years. A lot of people feel that it wasn't right, that it was, whether they bought it or not, that it was given to a private company.
You've probably enjoyed the Resnick's products. Their brand Wonderful produces almonds, pistachios, and the pomegranate drink. Linda Resnick was memorable to me from the Morgan Spurlock documentary, Pom Wonderful Presents the Greatest Movie Ever Sold. Spurlock was examining how brands work their way into entertainment. With a very meta concept, he takes meetings with marketing executives asking them to fund his documentary in exchange for product placement. In this scene, he meets with Linda Resnick, trying to entice Pom Wonderful to come in at the highest level of title sponsorship.
The brands that we want to go after are brands that I feel like really reflect what I think the movie stands for, what I stand for, doing something different, doing something innovative.
We think that you represent Pom in a way, and Pom represents you, that we're compatible together. Yeah. So that's why I'm attracted to it. The other thing is, full transparency is very important to us. And I think it's important that people know how much we spent to get in this movie, and that we actually paid for it, because why not?
Do you have any concerns?
Of course. I wouldn't be a Jewish mother if I didn't have concerns. But part of being out there and being successful is taking chances.
That was the first I'd ever heard of Linda Resnick. Now in Water and Power, I see a whole other side to her business.
Linda is a genius marketer. You know, I'm not a marketing person, so I don't know. I don't have those skills, I don't think. So it's fascinating to see what she's been able to do with marketing. It's all marketing. I mean, look, you know, wonderful products are everywhere. So when you market, that's what you do. What do? You market. Why are you marketing? To sell your products for what? To make money. So, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's not illegal. That's her business.
Well, just in your film, we see another side to what's being marketed and what the costs of it are.
Right.
Not the financial costs, so there are some financial costs, but also what environmental costs there are.
Well, Morgan's film, I think, was a little more fun.
Anyway,
This definitely isn't fun.
Well, they're about two different things, so
right,
it's not
but
to
I mean,
make
this
any
is
corollaries.
a very serious topic that, you know, I almost have to get in the mood to talk about because it's so serious that you almost don't, it's not surface. We're talking about our water that is, you know, not going to be here forever. And you can say those things, but it's like, you know, that's why we brought Carol Rowland here, who has no water. I mean, this is happening. It's happening in California. It's happening around the world. And so it's you know, my husband said, you know, this was really a public service film because it's like people need to know what is going on. So
how did it change the way you look at water?
Well, it opened my eyes tremendously. I mean, I try to conserve more, you know, I just do little things. Shut the water when I'm brushing my teeth, try to take less showers. I mean, you know, but it's one of those things that you don't really think about until it affects you, right? So that's why we're trying to tell people ahead of time before it affects you, because imagine really having to live like Michael Lunsford, the guy at the beginning of the movie, where he's like collecting rainwater to make coffee, and he ended up getting a tank. But it's really frightening, and it's really made me think about my footprint. But it can't just be about me. It has to be everyone.
I read an interview with you, I think sometime around Odd Man Out, where you were saying you wanted to get away from doing another legal documentary. You wanted to make a romantic comedy. And whatever that wish was from a few years ago doesn't seem like you really followed through on it.
Well, you know, it's funny. I think my tendency, I started out as an actor. I'm very interested in human beings and behavior and why people do things. I like to laugh. I have a young child. I don't like everything to be so serious. But what's interesting is that it's a very serious time, and we need to kind of take advantage of that moment.
I want to thank Marina Zenovich for speaking with me. Her film, Water and Power, A California Heist, will open theatrically in New York and Los Angeles on March 3rd, and it will air globally on National Geographic on March 14th. Pure Nonfiction is distributed by the TIFF Podcast Network. Thanks to our team. Series producer, Michael Scotti Jr. Sound mixer, Kyle Murphy. Web designer, Cross Strategy. Marketing coordinator, Sarah Moto. Social media master, Jordan Smith. And executive producer, Rafaela Nehausen. I'm Tom Powers. You can follow me on Twitter at THOM_Powers. If you're in New York, check out our screening series, Stranger Than Fiction, on Tuesday nights at IFC Center. And if you're in Miami, look for me at the Miami Film Festival, happening March 3rd through 12th. You can read our show notes, learn about live events, and sign up for our newsletter at purenonfiction.net.